Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our session on database change management today. Um, I'm joined with Jeff Smith, whom I'm sure everyone knows. Say
Hello.
hi. Hi, Jeff. How are you this fine afternoon, morning, day?
I'm great.
Excellent. Did you get enough sleep from our late night conference last night?
I went to bed at midnight and woke up at 5. So
That's plenty.
sounds about right.
Yeah, excellent. All right. So typical Zoom thing, typical Zoom rules. We have our QA, so you're more than welcome to ask questions in the QA. And then we have the chat, which you can ask in there, but just keep it in the QA so everyone can see all the questions that you ask in case it's relevant to someone else. So with that, we will start. So Jeff and I are product managers in the database developer tools team. And here's just pretty much a sampling of the major products that we represent. Everyone knows SQL Developer. Everyone uses SQL Developer, Data Modeler, Oracle REST Data Services. SQLcl, our command line tool, which is a good replacement for SQL+, as well as database actions, which are our UI-based or our web-based tools where we are slowly moving to. So we're trying to get all the functionality of SQL Developer and Data Modeler and all that good stuff over into database actions. And we have a good majority of them in there, and every day we add more and more. So this is just again, I don't know if we're missing anything on here.
Oh, we're building new things that we can't talk about yet, but
yeah, we
talk about them anyway if you wanted to.
And we're actually going to be producing or releasing a new service in OCI. It's going to be our database tool service, where we hope to wrangle the database connection issue that all clouds seem to have an issue with, which is multiple services all ask for the same details. So we kind of need to unify that and help reduce the password change bomb that happens if you have a password that changed for your database user, and then you have to find the 13 services that use that database user, or just wait for them to fail and then change them one at a time, as well as exposing your database or different types of databases, different kinds, different vendors of databases with a SQL worksheet, instead of having you to install various objects or tools or utilities in a more lengthy manner. Why don't we just give you the access to that database worksheet if you want it? So take a look for that by the end of the year or before the end of the year, maybe early Christmas gift, early Black Friday gift. I don't know, however you want to look at it, but we'll see how that works out. So that's not why you're here, to hear us ramble on about stuff that's not available, but you're here to talk about database change management. So let us get started with that. So database change management, why is it difficult with databases, should we say? The first part is the stateful versus stateless talk. So a lot of your application developer colleagues in your organizations, I'm sure people who use, who are able to use, Kubernetes clusters or have that blue-green type of deployment where they can deploy their Node.js or their React app or their Python code or what have you in these environments and just switch over magically to the new one when they want to. With a database, you really don't have that luxury quite yet because there are always transactions going on. Now, if you can take a complete outage and be able to clone that database and then apply those changes and then bring that database up and point the applications over to that new database, then yeah, you kind of can do it. But a lot of the times our databases just can't go down for that amount of time. So we don't have that luxury of having this blue-green deployment. So how do we get around that? And how do we join the cool kids club of CI/CD with these new modern type of application deployment environments? We see that they're doing agile deployment, that they can get their stuff out fast and have all this accountability with it. Well, can we play in that realm too? And we also see that we have a lack of versioning in the database. Now, yes, there is edition-based redefinition, but it's not quite there yet for what we need to do with database change management. There's also the fact that we're talking to a lot of customers, and when they deploy into production and something goes wrong, is it a rollback or a roll forward? Do we just fix it in production because maybe it's just a tiny issue, and then just take that code and backport it, or do we not? So that's kind of a difficult decision we have to make when it comes time to deployment. Missing the changes, and that's kind of the roll forward, the roll backwards. If I'm a developer or have a team of developers who are doing this, and they're tracking their code by themselves, then more than likely they're going to miss something. Maybe they needed to walk their dog or something while they were building out their scripts, and they forgot to add that view or add that column from a table or add that SQL procedure that does XYZ for their applications. Well, when it comes time to move into these new environments, that's going to be missing. So it's going to throw errors and it's going to have issues. So how do we get around that? And how do we create these test environments to do that in there? So we see that there are a lot of challenges with database change management today if we don't have a good strategy to do it, which brings us to, how do we do it? Is it even possible? And yes, it is. So what we're going to talk about today is exactly that, and how we do it, and the ability to capture all the changes at once per developer, per environment. So using our tools, you can go walk your dog when he needs to be walked. But when you come back, if you just use SQLcl and what we're going to talk about with Liquibase today, then you will capture all the changes and moving it into a source code repository. So there is accountability. We have this push that our team has been doing in that CI/CD realm, and I'm sure you've seen our multiple conferences with that, and there will be more coming out. In fact, as we come closer to the release of that database tools service we talked about, we are going to probably be releasing the full end-to-end database change management deployment in OCI. Pipelines, development pipelines, deployment pipelines. We are going to probably be able to give you the code and the samples and the ability to have all of that on your databases in OCI by the year closeout. And we've been talking about this, how to do it, what to do it, using Jenkins or using Spinnaker or using this or using that. I think we're ready to talk about using it within a complete OCI solution come the end of this year. So that will be another talk we'll have. But what we're going to talk about today is going to be the crux of that change management. You can have all the pipelines in the world. You can have all the repositories in the world. If you're not tracking those changes, then it's in essence useless to you from a database change management standpoint. And then again, we need the ability to have these changes and track them and look at them and see how they work, and, convincing your management to bite off on this type of deployment and this change, as well as using it so that you can uptake this methodology. So let's get into how we do this. Enough of this talk. Let's get into how we do it. All right. Or how we do it. So
just a quick aside, Brian, I'm curious if people are bored, leave a note in the chat if your organization already source controls database objects and or PL SQL. Because I'm guessing it's maybe only half of you.
Or you can leave your phone number and we'll call you.
Or you can leave your phone number and I'll call you up and go, what's wrong with? No, I'm just curious, like who now is doing that? Just the source control bit.
Yes. And if you're not doing it, if you have trouble having the management teams buy off on it, this is a good list of why you should be or can be doing it. A lot of times, this is new to people, and it is a big ask if you've never done it before. And a lot of times, the environment or the organization will say, "Well, why would you want to do this? Why are you doing this? Why do we even need to do this?" And this is a good list because, as you've seen, now granted, just don't have your password be SolarWinds123. That helps a lot. But in the process of that, the supply chain hacks, so those supply chain things, issues with the code have become forefront lately, as you've seen in the news with a lot of organizations where people are slipstreaming stuff into the code during that code process. And with proper change management, you'll see those changes as they come in. So if someone tries to add a script to your code repository that creates them a DBA user with full access to the database, you'll see that, and you'll be able to stop it before it gets in. So, these are just good reasons of why it's even why you can justify this to your management to get on board with this type of process. Okay, so how do we do it? And what we do it is, you've heard from us before, it's pretty much SQLcl and Liquibase. So we have built Liquibase, or taken the open source Liquibase and added it to SQLcl. Now, it's different from the plain off-the-shelf Liquibase that you get from Liquibase, because we've added a bunch of cool things to it, and some of the stuff which is brand new and you'll see today. But more importantly, we've added things such as objects dependence resolution. So when you go ahead and you run this code to apply it to a new environment, our version is going to say, oh, I see that these two objects, or these objects, are dependent on one another. I better go and do this before I do this, so we don't have invalid objects or throw errors. Oh, I see there's an index on this column. I better make sure the column's there before I even try to do this index, or I better compile this procedure before I compile this function, because they're dependent on each other. So we have all that built in, as well as a couple other little things that make your life easier from an Oracle database standpoint. But just know that Liquibase and SQLcl are the crux of everything we're going to be talking about today. And as we move forward, we're going to start looking at, well, how do we add these features into, say, SQL Developer Web or some easier UI, so we can move things around in OCI as we progress forward with adding these things. So,
and what we're doing in OCI isn't crazy, weird, custom stuff. All of this you could easily do in your on-prem data centers and laptops or whatever.
Yeah, that's an important thing to note, is everything that comes out of our team, not only is it usually free, but it works across all Oracle databases, pretty much no matter where they are. So whether they are in OCI or some other cloud vendor or on premises, they will pretty much work the same, and you will be able to use them and install them on top of your database regardless. So that is something to note, and as well as it's free. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually jump into Liquibase and SQLcl and take a look at the important commands that you're going to be using. And then we'll actually jump into a command prompt and we'll run through this and see them in action and how you'll use them. Now, we're not going to go all the way to importing it into a code repository. In fact, we have a live lab coming at the end of October for some events that we're going to be holding that will walk you through this entire process of using Liquibase and SQLcl and a code repository to move code around and to check it in and all that. And then as well as that, we'll have, as I mentioned before, we'll have a lab and walkthroughs on how to set up the entire pipeline from the front to the back, to deployment pipelines to test and dev pipelines across the board. So that'll be coming at the end of probably November as well. So today we're just going to talk about actually just using Liquibase and all the features and stuff, because we've mentioned it in a lot of the web conferences that we've done, but we've never actually gone through the commands and say, oh, well, this does this and this does this and this does this. So that's what we're going to look at today, so you can get a little better handle on what you're doing with this. So the first thing that you're going to be using a lot, or the first one is gen object. So when you're at SQLcl, you type lb gen object and then the type, and then what you're going to do. And then the important thing to note here is that not only can you generate objects from the database, and I believe the next slide shows you, these are all the objects that you can pull with Liquibase gen objects. But not only do you have the ability to pull these particular objects, a little known fact is, you're also able to pull modules from ORDs. So if you're in Oracle REST Data Services and creating these REST modules, you can pull the modules, and you can also pull Application Express apps with this. And we'll take a look at that in a minute as well. So it's a lot more than just pulling, your tables and your SQL code. You can do a lot more with this generating of the objects. So just know as you use this and you go forward with this, if you wanted to pull individual database objects, you can do that. If you want to pull ORD stuff, you can do that. If you want to use this with Apex apps, you can do that as well. And we'll take a little bit deeper dive into the Apex side of the house and the ORD side of the house in a second. But what you're going to do most of the time is you're going to do the next command, which is the gen schema. So this is where, a developer is sitting in their database, teams of developers are working on this. And again, the dog shows up. My dog's hanging out right here. I don't have to walk him at the time, but if I did have to, I could just run or continue to develop. And then when I get back and it's time to pull my code, I can just do the gen schema. And that's going to capture all the supported objects we have in the entire schema. Now, we've added two things in the past two releases. The first thing is the dash split. Now, when you run the dash split with gen schema, it's going to take the objects and put them into little folders, into little directories, instead of just dumping all the files into a single directory. So if you have tables, it goes into the tables directory. If you have procedures, it goes into the procedures directory. It's a really nice feature to basically compartmentalize your code. So if you're looking for something, you don't have to dig through all these XML files. The next thing we added, and this is going to show up in 21.3, which is just about to be released. I'm going to be using it today so you can see it in action, is we've added the dash SQL flag. And what the dash SQL flag is going to do, alongside these XML files that Liquibase uses for the change management, we're also going to give you a SQL file that's just going to have the straight SQL in it. Now, it's mainly for cosmetics. We don't use it in the change tracking. We still have all that stuff in the XML so we can look at things and resolve things and have that in the change management tables. But it's really nice. So when you have those code reviews, when you're looking at these code reviews, when you have that code in your repository and you're browsing it, or for the change management process, you'll be able to directly see in those SQL files what's changing and what's not. Or if you wanted to quickly grab it and run it, you can just go grab it and run it. That's been an ask that a lot of people have been asking for, to have these SQL files alongside the XML files. So now we're going to have it in our 21.3 release. And the developer who works on SQLcl, he actually added it to this in a very fast time, as it was actually pretty fast. So it was quite nice. All right. So that's what the gen schema is going to do. Okay. And once all these things are done, so you'll have your, and you'll see it, once you have all your objects pulled, that's when you'll push them into your repository. So again, we have a lab that goes through this where, you'll have your repository, you'll create your developer branch, you'll clone it down, you'll create your developer branch locally, you'll grab your code, you'll add it to that developer branch, and then you'll hit a git push, and it'll push all that code to your repository, and then you'll do a merge request or a pull request, depending on if you're using GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, what have you, and then you'll merge that code in. So Liquibase is that Liquibase and SQLcl is that process of generating that code you're going to be committing. Now, there's also the option of doing control file. And now control file is basically if you want to go at it your own, roll your own, and just do this yourself and add the files and add those scripts that you want to do. This is going to help you generate that major control file, and then you'll add your scripts within there. Sure, we just give you the option to do it. If you want Liquibase to help you along, you'll just generate schema or you'll generate object. But just know that that control file generation is there if you want to go at this your own and do what you need to do. So that's an option. All right. So this actually just will show you. So if you did LB gen control file, it's going to dump out this file, as you can see, and it's going to have these include file name and file, and that's where you're going to put your files that you're generating. Again, they could be SQL files or they could be these XML files if you wanted to do this on your own. But again, why do it on your own when we can help you along and make sure you don't miss anything? But it's there if you want to go halfway with this or if you're just starting out with this. So just know that
some people might want to cover data or things that are tricksy. So the nice thing about this being in SQLcl is if you use the SQL-based change set type, we can run any valid SQL or PL/SQL command against the database. So you're not limited by anything really. You can apply any change you want using the Liquibase feature, but it gets executed via our SQLcl script engine. So it's super, super powerful, but I'm with Brian. I'm lazy. If I can represent it in a change log that I can get generated for me, I'll do that.
And we'll talk about data in a second. All right, so now actually running, once you have the changes, so there's two commands here that we'll look at first, and that's update and update SQL. So update's the big one. You do Liquibase update and then give it the changelog file name. Well, the controller file is usually the one that we're always using, but if it's an individual object, you can do that individual object. And that's going to actually start applying those changes into the environment you're going to. So again, when you'll see these pipelines, you'll see that part of that pipeline that we're deploying to or deploying these objects to, it's going to basically go grab SQLcl, install it for you, and then start running these Liquibase updates with the artifacts that we're creating from the code repositories. So you're going to see that, and then it's very simple. LB update the changelog, -changelog, and then the controller XML is usually the one you're going to see the most common, and that's going to actually apply it. Now, if you don't want to apply it and you just want to see the SQL that it's going to run, you can just do update SQL and the exact same thing. And that's going to let you, it's going to display it to the SQLcl screen, and it's going to say, oh, I'm going to run this, 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 but I'm not going to actually apply it to your environment so you can see what it's going to be doing before it actually does it. So
I think this is my favorite feature because I have trust issues. And before I automate things, I like to, show me what you're actually going to do before you do it. Or let me see how you're interpreting this change. How's that actually going to get applied to the database? It just makes me feel a lot better. And I have much more confidence before I just start automating updates to schemas, production or dev or test.
Well, that's part of the whole chain CI/CD process, because if I've tested this 17 times in other databases, you can trust the process, Jeff.
I could at least trust it a lot more. Otherwise, yeah.
Trust in the process.
I will find the 18th database that fails. That's how good I am.
Nice. There you go. There's your top tip for the day. If you don't learn anything about this, don't let Jeff apply your Liquibase updates to your production database. Do it yourself. There you go. So next, rollback. That's what we talked about before. You can basically roll back the changes that are in that file. So now the important thing to note here is you're rolling back the changes in the controller file that you're giving it. You're not rolling back the changes from forever. You're only doing it from the control file that you have. So make sure that you just understand that, and then you can give it an amount. So if I have 600 changes in this, I can, either do 9999 and that's going to do everything, or I can do 100 that's just going to do the 100 that are on there. So just know that that is possible. And with the Liquibase rollback, we also have rollback SQL, which is just like the update SQL. It's going to display what it's going to do with the rollback rather than actually do that. So that's an important thing to note. Now, the next one is LB diff, and I'm not sure when this made it in or how long this has been around, because I know that Symes said he's been working on this in
6 months.
Has it been there? Okay. So this is actually kind of cool, and we'll see this in action as well. You can basically say, hey, Liquibase, tell me what the difference is between the database I'm in now and this one over here. And it's going to generate this report, and it's going to say, oh, well, this database is missing this column and this procedure and this package and this table and this and that. And it's going to spit out this report. So you kind of know what's going on between these two environments. It's a very helpful feature. I know it's a feature that a lot of people have been asking for. I know that some people really want to, at a grander level, they want to know the difference between database A and database B, but at least we have it here at the particular schema level. So this is something that you could use between two database schemas and say, hey, what's going on? Do I have the right changes? And really explore them without actually applying or jumping into those databases. And then lastly, we have Liquibase DB doc, and it just generates a Java doc that you can peruse and take a look at. And kind of, include, you can actually, if you really want to, is part of that CI/CD process. The last thing you run for your change management is the docs, and then you throw them into a version, and then now you have all the changes that come along with that version. So if someone really wanted to go, they can go into the repository. Oh, look at this look at this HTML file, and then see exactly what was changed in a nice documented way. Everyone wants their changes documented, so we just give the option to do it right here instead of actually handwriting the document. So that's another nice feature that we have within the product for you to use. All right. So we're not going to go into these, but these are more advanced commands that deal with the sessions and the locks that Liquibase does. So you're more than welcome to take a look at this, and these are all documented and whatnot. So by all means, don't be shy. And
the status one's interesting. I think the other ones are like when things go wrong.
Yes, it's usually when things go wrong.
But the status one's interesting.
And I think the last one is, it's not on here, there's a LB version. So if you really want to know the version, you can do that, but it's on there. So Liquibase and ORDS, it's really just that simple. You export the module and then you install it. It's really, really easy. There are some flags in the documentation if you wanted to look at. By default, it's going to pull the privileges, and it's going to pull most of the things that go along with this, with that module. Now you can suppress certain things with it by giving it false with the flag, but for the most part, you'll run it this way, which is going to just generate the entire object. And if you actually pop it open, you can see the SQLcl that comes with it. But if you did, as part of the procedure, you were creating these REST data services within your database, and you needed to push these new data services to production, this is the way to do it, the easiest way to do it. Again, in our whole thing of, the database tools team controlling the world, as we always do every day, we want to see, or we'd like to see that, when developers develop on an Oracle database, that most modern development platforms speak JSON. Well, the database speaks JSON via REST. So, hey, now everyone's friends. Create these REST services, have the database speak REST, and your developers, your app developers may not even know where it's coming from. You can just tell them it's so-and-so database, and it's actually an Oracle database that's just speaking JSON, and you'll create these REST modules. And then these will be part of your process to install them as you go from environment to environment to environment. And then here's how you do it. You pull them out. Really easy to do. So just know that you can have these modules and move them around. Next part is Apex, moving that around. Again, same thing, LBGen object type is Apex, and then you give the application ID. We also do have that dash split. So what it's going to do is it's going to split it apart into pages and components. So it'll have a whole folder structure, and you'll be able to see that as well. And that's great. You'll want to do that for the CI/CD. So basically, you spit it out into a giant XML file. When it comes time to see what has changed between, when you're pushing this code in the repository and merging it, you're going to basically be comparing one giant file. And if there's multiple changes in there, you're going to be looking through it. It's going to be a real pain. But if I've split it and I have changes to say 2 pages, I will instantly see that, and it'll say, oh, page 1.xml has changed and page 7.xml has changed. You'll be able to, zero in exactly what's changed. Now, with this, there are 2 important flags we'd like to make you aware of that you'll want to use. And one of it is skip export date, and the other one is export original IDs. Very important to use this, especially for change management. If you don't, the Apex just on the exporting process will start changing these, and then every file that goes into your repository will be flagged as changed, because now you have all new IDs and you have all new dates on there, or it's going to add the export date on there. And that's going to, as I said, every file will be flagged as it having a change in it. And your poor release manager is just not going to like you, because he's going to have to look through every file. Or it comes to the point where he's like, I just don't care. And it just goes and merges in. And that's where you have issues. So if you really want to control this, if you really want to do this at a per change level, you'll want to use these 3 flags when exporting these files out. So just know that you do that. And again, if you want to apply it, you can do individual change, the LB update, or you can do the entire thing to install the entire Apex app. So that is something to keep an eye on, or just to know. All right. Table data. So Jeff kind of hinted at this before. This is a feature I think we snuck in early this year, early last year, or late last year. Not a lot of people noticed it, but it's now in there. And that's the data. So you can export data. It all goes into a single file. This is great for metadata changes. So if I have changes in my metadata, let's say I have a table, a metadata table that is for lists of values or that are used for lookup values or something like that. This is a great way to make sure they go and move around. It's not going to be used for millions and millions of rows. You know, we have better tools. Oracle has better tools for that data pump or exporting tables or, you know, whatever, transportable table spaces. There's a lot better tools for moving huge amounts of data around. Or you can use ORDs and just make REST services. But regardless, if you do need to move this around. Now, this is something that we will be adding to as we go forward. What we need to add to this is basically an upsert or a merge. So I need to move this data around and I need to put it in my production environment. If I've been doing this, more than likely there's going to be data in there. And instead of truncating the entire table, maybe there's IDs and a sequence that I need to keep because I'm doing my lookup by a sequence or an ID. What we need to do is basically say, hey, I know there's data in this table, and then give you the primary key so that when we add this data to the table, it looks and says, oh, well, this already exists. I'll just update it. Oh, it doesn't exist. I'll add it instead of dumping the entire table and then rechanging all the sequence numbers. So that's something we're going to be working on. We need to add it. We know we need to add it. But if you just need a quick way to move data around from table to table, you can always do it this way. So just know that that exists. Okay. So how do we actually track changes? Now that's great that you're doing all this, but how do we actually track changes? So there's 2 tables and a view on that table. And we'll take a look at this table as we move these around. But what to know is that when you're looking at these tables, you can see the exact SQL that was run from these tables. So you'll see, for example, in the red bordered one, what we did is we created a table and then we made a change to a table and we added it and we ran Liquibase and we applied it again. And with that new column, instead of, and I've sat on some other change management, database change management product calls. And, some people have asked this question is, what do you do when, you have a table change? And a lot of their answers were, oh, well, either we dump the entire table and then we rebuild the table and we kind of move your data over, or we make a shadow table with a new column and we move your data over and then we switch them, which is okay, I guess, but why don't you just know that that table exists and just issue an alter table? And that's what we do with Liquibase. We say, oh, that table exists. I see a new column. Well, I'm just going to add the new column instead of doing some sketchy moving of data, this, there, and the other thing, and then having all that much fun with that. So we just say, hey, that table exists. This package does this exist. We're going to do what needs to be done. So as you look at these, if you look at your change management or your change log details table, you'll see this as you add these changes. We will do what's right according to an Oracle database and the rules that go with an Oracle database, that rather than try to do some funny thing where we're moving your data around. Because if you have a table that has 72 gazillion rows in it and you just want to add a column, just imagine the time it would take to make a shadow table, to move that data and then move it back. It's just not going to be fun. So we just add the column. Real easy. And again, at any point, you can look in these tables and see the exact SQL that was run. You can see that in the gold border. We created a procedure. We see that, and that's just going to be in there. So we can exactly see all the procedures and all the code that was generated and applied to your database within these tables. So this is going to be great for when we need to look at this. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually look at Liquibase and see it going on here. So let me just change over. Jeff, was there anything that popped up in our questions that we need to address today?
A lot of people are saying you sound really good today.
I do.
Yeah, like podcast worthy.
I am a podcast. I used to have a podcast.
I'm not going to ask anything more because I really don't want to hear it, but you're doing good.
Well, thanks. Okay. All right. So I can find my command prompt and we can start.
Oh, your brother's on here.
You want to see me kick him off? I think I can kick him off. Should we do it?
Well, I was going to say I had a podcast with your brother and then he quit on me. So
let's see.
There's the dirty laundry for the Spindolini family with me.
Oh, we can rename him.
True. We should get back to the tech stuff. That's what people are here for. They're not here for the gossipy stuff.
Okay, I've renamed him the doofus. All right, Zoom, it's wonderful. All right, so here we go. Let's share the screen and let's share the terminal. Okay, so here we are in a database. This is an autonomous database. And with all things that we demo, we have a single table in here. So again, SQLcl has this great thing called tables. And it's going to show me all the tables in my schema right now. I'm still connected to the database. Which I may not be, because I think I jumped off VPN. Should remember that. All right, let me fix that real quick. Okay, so let's just get back in here and we will set our cloud config and we will connect to our database and we'll try this one more time.
So while he's doing that, based on some of the questions I've gotten, I'll add some flavor. I'll try to. The Liquibase technology is great, and obviously we evaluated and decided to implement it in our tools, but it wasn't good enough for what we needed to give Oracle developers. So we've added quite a bit to it, including things like, hey, after you've done all this work in a schema and you've captured said work and you're ready to go apply it somewhere else, the order in which that stuff is applied makes a huge difference. So, when we're generating these change logs, these XML files, these SQL files, we're also parsing all of the code in that description of what's happening in the schema. We're looking for references. And then we're ordering what I think Brian referred to this once, the controller. The controller is like a master XML file, which lists the change sets to be applied. We're dynamically ordering that, so it's smart enough to create the types, then the tables, then the indexes, then the constraints, so that you don't have these object creation ordering issues. Are you back connected again?
We are connected.
Oh, so I don't have to stall for time.
No, awesome. You don't. We're just looking at. So we have one table called trees, and this is just data that I use that Jeff loves. I need to find new data, but we can see that there's 6 rows.
Are you doing the trees thing again?
I am. I do. I use it every time. So there we go. This is just basically a list of trees that are in Cary, North Carolina that have been interesting to the populace there. So this is actual real data from the town of Cary, North Carolina, who tracks trees. But so there's a tree of cabinet, and everything goes to Jeff because and I also put that jeff.com, that guy who emailed you and asked you if you wanted to buy it, that jeff.com. So I've included him in here too.
That's good.
Excellent. All right. So the first thing we're going to do, we talked about, is we're going to generate the schema. So here we go. We're going to just paste it and we're going to run this. And we're also going to do the new command, which is the split as well as the SQL. Now this is going to go and it's going to generate what we need to generate here. And what I can do is let me go in here and we can take a look at the files that it's creating as well. So I put this in a special little folder here. And we will see this as it creates these. Now, again, we've added this new -SQL thing that basically creates these cosmetic files. Again, they don't have to be cosmetic. We treat them cosmetically because they're not used when we actually do this change tracking within the database, but it is something that is there for making that CI/CD process, that process of actually looking at things a lot easier, because it's just nice to see that SQL and what's going on. So what we've done is we've created 3 folders and a table. Now we can actually look at that if we want. And let me just open up a new tab here, and we can actually just jump into that and take a look really quick. I don't want to bore anyone with looking at files, but just to see that they're there, we can do that.
I can hear people over their muted microphones falling asleep already.
Yeah, exactly. So let me just go and share that, because you all want to see directories. So if I just do an ls here, we have the controller, we have the index for indexes, procedure, and table. And if I cd into the table, we'll see that there's the SQL, and now there's the XML. So there's our new things. And if we do
the splitting of files by object type was also a huge request from the community. And I think also because it's more naturally how people organize their work in their source code repos, right?
Yes. Then I also noticed that the person who created this trees table in Carrie, they spelled submission wrong here for this one.
Yeah.
I got a lot of complaints.
I'll talk to him.
Okay. And then if we wanted to look at the XML file, it's very similar, but we have it. There's some little more information into it. And again, as you see, if you're checking in code or looking at code in a repository, it's a lot easier to, look at the actual this, because we're familiar with that rather than looking at this XML. So that's why, that was the ask to do that. So that is what we did. All right, back to here. Now that we have that done. Now, again, we can also grab, there is a REST service that we created. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab that as well. And just as we saw before, we're gonna grab that, and I have a thing wrong. Confluence does this all the time. It kills my my dashes, but we won't blame it too much. And this is going to go and grab that, and now we have that as well. So now we have that actual REST service. So we can go and apply that REST service. So if you had a bunch of REST services, you can go grab them and then push them into the new environment. All right. And now if we wanted the data, we can actually grab the data as well. So what we can do is we can do an LB data, and we can go grab these 6 objects, or these 6 rows out of the tree data. So there's LB data, objects, and trees. And go and take a look at that as well. And there we go. It's done. And now we've created a data file, and that data file can be used or included in your controller file. You can be used after, before, or whatnot, or you can add it to your pipelines or what have you to move that data around, add that data around. So that is done. Now, what we can do is we can actually go in there and we can apply this. So what I can do is I can go connect to a new user here. And so we'll just use with Liquibase, we'll go connect to that database. We have a new user here. We'll go and pretend that we're in a new database, not in the same database, going and changing schemas. And then here we have nothing in this user. So, or we shouldn't have anything. If I do tables, there's nothing in here. So what I can do is, since I'm in the directory, I can go and I can start running our update. So what we're going to do is we're going to update, and we're going to install our objects. And this is going to go, and again, if this, pretend this is part of your pipeline or your procedure, this is going to go and it's going to install all of our objects that we just pulled out of the repository, or we just pulled from that last schema, and apply them to this brand new schema. Now this schema is empty. So again, you can think of it, this is the very beginning, this is V1, but this is going to run these changes and put them into there. And there we go. We have applied those. So now we have, if I do tables, we'll see that we have the changelog tables as well as the trees. And if we actually go look at this table, we'll see that, there's the SQL that we've created. Is a little messy here, but we can see that the create table, the create or replace procedure, and then the create index is there. So all those are here, and we can, we have a track or a change tracking log of all these that have happened. It's a lot easier to look at with SQL Developer Web. So we can actually go and do that too. But yeah, so this is very easy. Now, if we want to add the data, I can go and add the data. So what we'll do is we'll add our data here. And this is going to go and install the data into that table. Which is just simple 6 rows that are installed. And then lastly, we'll have the, we can install the REST service if we want. So that's pretty much.
Can you show the rollback SQL? Well, I don't want to. Theoretically, after this update is applied, we could do a rollback, or we could do the rollback SQL to see what would be applied if he did a rollback. And anytime he did these updates, he could have said first, use the update SQL command, and the database would go, oh, it looks like we need to apply this work. Here's what we would do to this environment.
You want to do rollback or no? Well,
nah, don't worry about it. You've got 12 minutes.
Okay. So now we have this environment. So what we're going to do is we're just going to jump back and into the existing one, and we just want to do some other commands here just so we can see some of the other goodies that we have here. So as long as I have my host file here correct and everything wonderful, we're going to go and alter the table. So we're going to add a new column to the table. We're going to alter now that we have a new column on our table, and now we're going to just run our gen schema again. And that's going to go and split these. But what I'm going to do here now is I have another database that we're going to use, and we're going to do a diff between the two. And what it's going to do, it's going to spit out a report, and if all is well, it's going to say, hey, you're missing a column, because in that database, let's say this is our UAT or production database, we're going to have that, we're going to have everything but that. So again, there's a super secret password, and it's going to go over there and it's going to run against this database here. And what's going to happen at the end, it's going to create this report. It's called a diff report. And we can actually take a look at that report after it's done creating it. And it's going to show you all the things that it checks for. And it's going to say, hey, I'm missing a column. So it's using the controller that we have, or it's using the environment that we're in right now. And it's going to check that other environment for all the things that are the same and all the things that are different. And then it's going to provide us a report on how to do that and what that, take a look at that. And so this should be done in a second. Do we want to generate the docs, or is that something we want to take a look at? I'm seeing if I have them.
It's your show, man. There's been a lot of good Q&A. We might want to leave
we might have
5 minutes at the end to open the mics up if people want to.
Yeah, we can do that. That's probably the best thing to do. It's done. Yeah, it's done. So let me just paste here. Take a look at this report. And so there's the report. And this actually has the change log, but you see here that this is the missing column for that. It's actually missing the change log for the table as well, but that's the missing column right there. So it knows that, hey, you got a missing column on that. And then looks for all these other things. So it's a nice thing. I should have applied it, but yeah, it's a nice little report that you can do across environments to say, but just before you're changing it, or just before you're applying this, to say, yes, this is what I'm expecting to happen. I'm expecting to, I know that we made this change. It's part of my, my docs. I need to make sure that that's working. So, and if we actually just jump in and take a look at the docs real quick that it creates, we can go here. So here are the Java docs that it creates. It's going to have a whole bunch of my current tables. Here are my 2 tables. Here's the trees table. Here's all the, the information about that. If there's columns or changes or anything, we can have that picture tree and anything we have on this. So this is a nice little documentation that I can create just by running that lbdoc command and having everything on there, and have a whole bunch of good stuff on here for it. And then we can take this little bundle of docs that it creates, and we can basically have it as part of our change tracking process as we go for CI/CD from environment to environment to environment, and have this versioning. So this, we could put this into our branch. When we merge our branch, we call that branch V1. It creates that artifact, that zip file of that V1, and this is included. You have a V2, V3, V4, and each one of these will have it. So that's a nice addition to having this in there. So there's that as well. So that pretty much goes over most of the commands you're going to use in the time that we have. So Jeff, let's jump to questions and see if we have anything going on we need to answer. So Jeff, what have you seen for the Q&A and then in the chat?
A good common question is, how can we keep track or report on differences across environments? And I think the diff thing that you just showed kind of demonstrated part of that. Maybe you could show the actual changelog tables in the database, because that kind of is the magic that Liquibase uses to keep status and what's been applied.
We can do that. So where are we? Here we go. Let's go look at this. All right, we're in SQL Developer Web. And then here we'll take a look at this table right here. So we probably just want to do should we just do a select on it? Yeah. There's another thing. I can just drop that there and say, hey, I want to do a select and apply. And then we can run that. All right, so here is our table. And then you can see the file name, the SQL that was run. Hover over this and it shows it. And these are the changes that were done on this. Now, what I can do while you talk is I'll go jump into this environment and I'll go run the next change on it, while we answer the next question. And then we can refresh the table and we can see that the new changes that went in there, the alter table or the alter column. What's our next question we have, or the next thing you're seeing?
Volodymyr is asking, when I check diffs during code reviews, do I need, I must be 100% sure that my reviewer environment is always the same as my production environments. And if we have different schema versions on productions, do we have to recheck all the possible? I think it's just a question about all of the various states an application might be in different environments. You've got 7 varieties of versions applied to different customer environments, for example. And, a lot of these questions aren't necessarily technically based. It's more, it's technically based, but it's also based on, what practices do you have in play for your groups? And
yeah, that's one of the things that we didn't, here it is right there. So there's our alter table, because I just ran it in the background again. So there we go. It just skipped these two because nothing was changed. And then it saw that the table was changed and it just did an alter table. So there's a change log right there. So environments is a whole nother thing. And again, we want to address that. We addressed it kind of in one of our talks that we had back in April, but different environments and how we do this with Oracle without, killing our licenses or being able to do this on-prem or in the cloud. A lot of that hinges on the ability to replicate quickly and have multiple environments quickly. And a lot of that falls onto the multi-tenant option, which is a more expensive option. But with 19C and then with 21 and 23 and all the whatever versions we have coming out after that, you do get 3 pluggable databases free per CDB. So it does allow you to quickly spin up environments based upon maybe production or dev or UAT, especially to give them out to developers. Every developer should, in essence, have their own environment when they're developing. Now, yes, that's easier said than actually done, but that multi-tenant does give you the ability to do that rather quickly, especially if you want to clone out a metadata only data PDB from there so the developer can start working, or start cloning full clones from a development environment with fake data in it so your developers can start working on it. But they should have individual environments if possible so they can all do that. So that is something that we do recommend. Again, it's easier said than done. So, you know, that's what we'd like to see happen. If you do have, or in the cloud, it's a little easier there with the autonomous database because you can send in an API and just do what you need to do. Little known fact, we also have a bunch of APIs that ORDS, Oracle REST Data Services, has that makes cloning and creating PDBs quite easy as well. So if you do use Oracle REST Data Services on premises and you do have it hooked up for the database APIs, you can use a whole series of web services to actually start cloning stuff. So you can hook those into an application and easily be able to create environments, or give the ability to create environments. We've actually been talking to a bunch of customers about this, so I'll just really quick jump in here. This is just a whole bunch of APIs we have. This is looking at a database using Oracle REST Data Services in the DB API. So, you know, list my PDBs, and this is just a simple REST call over, oh, here are all your PDBs. Create a PDB. Oh, here's a simple REST call. I can just hit send and it's going to create me a PDB, or stop it, or open it, or clone a PDB, or drop a PDB. So you can envision an environment where a developer can easily go and create their own environment very quickly, start developing in it, and then delete it when they're done. Or a data scientist or somebody, or any kind of developer, can go in there and create these development environments based upon something that they have access to, so they can immediately start developing in these environments without having to go through this whole process. We talked to somebody a couple of days ago where it takes them 14 days to bring up a Oracle environment for the developer. Now, you know, it's a REST call and it's bam, 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 and I'm done. So, you know, this is kind of a philosophical thing that we keep coming back to, but, you know, that's kind of helps with the whole process. Anything else?
You should tell us about your live lab you're working on again.
Which one? There's so many. Okay, so we have two. We have one live lab we have coming out at the end of next month. It's just about done. This is going to walk you through the entire process that we just did, but using a code repository. So it's going to set up your database schema. It's going to set up all your environments, your database, and then it's going to use a Git repository to push that code and pull the code and create branches. It's going to give you all the commands and walk you through how to do it. So it's going to help you with pretty much database change management in Git 101. You should probably call it Git and database change management 101. But that's what we are going to be having and what we're going to be working on. Now, the second one after that is going to be the big one. And that one we need, you know, is going to have everything. It's going to be from the very beginning.
CI/CD enchilada.
Yes.
Hey, Chris is reminding me you're late for your next call, so I will wrap things up. Brian, this was an awesome discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone for attending, and we will see you later. If you want to wrap this up, Jeff.
Yeah, I will wrap it up. Hey, thanks.
I hope I can leave this without crashing the conference.
The same for this series. Brian will share his slides. Our gracious host, Anusha, will upload those so they're available. The recordings will be available usually next day or even same day. For follow-up info, you know, I've blogged and did videos on the Liquibase feature before, and I've got existing slide decks. If you're just interested in learning more and you want to reach out to us, our email addresses, I'll put those in the chat because I'm nice. So to everyone, Brian Spender, Oracle, and I am jeff.d.smith@oracle.com. What else do we have going on that you might need to know? We do quarterly updates on our products. So when he's referring to things like 21.3, that means at the end of this month is when we have the next batch of releases scheduled to go out. So some of the things he was teasing in SQLcl, like the Liquibase support for generating not only the XML change logs, but the SQL-based ones, so you can have the easier to read diffs and code reviews. That'll be available hopefully at the end of the month. It might be a week or two later, but I want to thank everyone for attending and staying for the whole hour. Thanks. We always appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll have another one of these scheduled in a few weeks. So thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week.